What's up, everyone? Tonight, we're stepping into the flickering shadows of a Viking great hall, where the air thrums with anticipation and the scent of pine smoke carries whispers of ancient power. You're about to discover what actually happened at Viking feasts, not the Hollywood version with crude warriors gnawing on turkey legs, but the sophisticated, spiritually charged gatherings that shaped an entire civilization. So before you get comfortable, like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your city and current time. I love knowing where in the world you're listening from as we journey back together. Now, turn off the lights, maybe switch on a fan for that gentle background sound, and let's begin our journey tonight. You stand at the threshold of a great hall, and immediately you understand this isn't just architecture. It's sacred geometry made manifest in timber and stone. The massive oak beams above you stretch like the ribs of some primordial beast, each one carefully selected not just for strength, but for spiritual significance. The Vikings believed trees held the memories of the earth itself, and these beams, some reaching 40 feet in length, whisper stories of centuries spent drinking sunlight and rain. You can almost hear the forest's heartbeat in the wood grain that spirals above your head like frozen music. The hall extends before you in a perfect rectangle, its proportions following ancient mathematical principles that scholars still debate today. Some historians argue these dimensions mirror the Norse cosmos itself, the length representing Midgard, the width symbolizing the bridge between mortal and divine realms. Others suggest a more practical approach, claiming the measurements simply reflected the number of expected guests and the acoustics needed for storytelling. But as you feel the space embrace you, wrapping around your shoulders like a familiar cloak, you sense something deeper at work here. The walls rise around you, constructed from massive logs fitted together with precision that would make modern carpenters weep. Though let's be honest, they probably wouldn't appreciate the complete lack of insulation. Each log was hand-selected, its surface smoothed by countless hours of careful work. The gaps between them are sealed with a mixture of moss, clay, and animal hair, creating a barrier against the harsh Nordic winters that could last 8 months of a year. You run your fingers along the wood, feeling the subtle texture where axes and draw knives shaped each surface. The craftsmanship speaks of patience, of communities working together through long winter months when darkness stretched from afternoon to morning. Above you, the roof peaks in a dramatic arch that seems to reach toward the realm of the gods themselves. This isn't mere structural engineering. It's a deliberate attempt to create a space where the mundane and the sacred could coexist. The peak, often crowned with carved dragon heads or ravens, serves as a symbolic gateway between worlds. When smoke from the central fire rises through the carefully positioned openings, it carries with it the prayers and offerings of those gathered below. You watch as imaginary smoke curls upward, following pathways that Viking builders calculated with mathematical precision to ensure proper ventilation while maintaining the mystical atmosphere. The central fire pit dominates the hall's heart, a circular depression lined with carefully arranged stones. Each stone was chosen not just for its heat resistance, but for its spiritual properties. Vikings believed certain rocks held the power to channel energy between the earthly and divine realms. The fire pit's placement follows strict astronomical alignments, positioned to catch the first rays of dawn during the winter solstice. Archaeological evidence suggests some halls were oriented to specific star formations, turning the entire structure into a massive compass pointing toward cosmic significance. Around the fire pit, you notice the intricate drainage system that kept the hall habitable during those legendary drinking sessions. Stone channels, barely visible beneath layers of rushes and firs, directed melted snow and spilled mead away from the main gathering areas. This engineering marvel prevented the soggy disasters that plagued lesser halls, because nothing kills a sacred feast atmosphere quite like standing ankle-deep in fermented honey wine and melted slush. The wooden pillars that support the structure aren't merely functional elements. They're carved masterpieces that serve as history books written in oak and ash. Each pillar tells stories through intricate knotwork patterns that spiral from floor to ceiling. These aren't random decorations, but coded messages that preserve genealogies, property rights, and spiritual beliefs. You trace the patterns with your eyes, following serpentine creatures that weave through geometric designs. Historians still debate whether these carvings represent actual historical events or mythological allegories, but their presence transforms the hall from simple shelter into a three-dimensional manuscript. The floor beneath your feet consists of packed earth covered with layers of rushes, herbs, and carefully tanned furs. This seemingly simple arrangement actually represents sophisticated environmental control. The rushes absorb moisture and odors while releasing subtle fragrances as they're compressed by footsteps. Beneath them, the earth floor is mixed with charcoal and lime, creating a surface that naturally neutralizes acidic spills and prevents the growth of harmful bacteria. Vikings understood chemistry in ways that wouldn't be formally recognized by European scholars for centuries. Windows are few and carefully positioned, not from any lack of architectural knowledge, but from deliberate design choices. The limited natural light creates an atmosphere of intimacy and mystery, forcing guests to rely on firelight and torches for illumination. This controlled lighting serves multiple purposes. It creates dramatic shadows that enhance storytelling. It forces people to gather closer together around the fire, and it provides a psychological separation from the outside world. When you enter this space, you're not just walking into a building, you're stepping into a different realm entirely. The acoustic properties of the hall represent, perhaps, its most sophisticated feature. The curved roof and strategic placement of hanging tapestries create a sound environment that amplifies human voices while muffling outside noise. A skilled skald standing at the hall center can be heard clearly by everyone present, while conversations at the far ends remain private. This acoustic engineering allowed for both communal experiences and intimate discussions, essential elements of Viking social dynamics. As you stand in this sacred space, you begin to understand that Viking feasts weren't just about eating and drinking. They were elaborate ceremonies that reinforced social bonds, transmitted cultural knowledge, and connected communities to their spiritual beliefs. The hall itself was the first course in an experience that would transform every person who entered its wooden embrace. You watch as the first invitation arrives, carried by a young messenger whose breath forms small clouds in the crisp morning air. The invitation isn't written on parchment. Literacy was still a luxury reserved for the wealthy and the clergy, but instead takes the form of a carved wooden token, smooth from handling and warm against your palm. The intricate knotwork pattern etched into its surface tells you everything you need to know: who's hosting, what occasion demands celebration, and most importantly, where you stand in the social hierarchy. Because in Viking society, receiving an invitation wasn't just about getting fed. It was about getting recognized as someone worth feeding. The messenger hands you the token with a practiced formality that speaks of countless similar deliveries. His role isn't merely practical, but deeply ceremonial. He represents the host's honor, and his behavior reflects directly on the feast's prestige. You notice how he maintains eye contact, how his voice carries the proper inflection when he speaks the ritual words of invitation. This isn't just a dinner party invitation. It's a summons to participate in a sacred social contract that will bind everyone present in webs of obligation and mutual support. The timing of your invitation reveals volumes about your standing in the community. Those who receive their tokens weeks in advance are the Jarl's closest allies, the successful merchants, the renowned warriors whose presence lends gravity to any gathering. You're relieved to discover your invitation arrived with the second wave, respectable timing that places you solidly in the middle tier of local society. The third wave invitations, delivered just days before the feast, go to the craftsmen, the younger sons, the wives of lesser farmers. The fourth wave doesn't really exist because by then you're either a thrall helping with preparations or you're not Viking enough to matter. The token itself serves as your entry pass, but more than that, it's a tangible piece of the host's reputation. The quality of the carving, the type of wood used, even the leather cord that allows you to wear it around your neck. All these details communicate the wealth and sophistication of your host. You run your thumb over the smooth surface, feeling the subtle ridges where the artist's knife followed the grain of the wood. Archaeological evidence suggests these tokens were often kept as mementos, passed down through families as proof of ancestors' social connections. Some historians debate whether the tokens held magical properties, arguing that the carved symbols might have served as protective amulets during the feast itself. The social mathematics of Viking feast invitations would make modern wedding planners weep with envy. Every invitation represents a complex calculation of political alliance, economic benefit, and social obligation. Your host has spent months, possibly years, cultivating the relationships that justify each wooden token. The feast isn't just about hospitality. It's about demonstrating the host's ability to gather influential people under one roof, to broker peace between rivals, to showcase prosperity that extends beyond mere personal wealth. You begin to understand that accepting the invitation commits you to far more than showing up with an appetite. The moment you receive that carved token, you become part of an intricate social contract that extends well beyond the feast itself. You're expected to bring gifts appropriate to your station, not too lavish, which would embarrass less wealthy guests, but not too modest, which would insult your host's generosity. The gift-giving protocols alone require careful negotiation, as your offering will be publicly presented and evaluated by everyone present. The hierarchical seating arrangements begin to take shape even before you arrive at the hall. Your invitation token contains subtle markings that indicate your approximate placement in the social order. The high table, positioned closest to the fire and facing the hall's entrance, is reserved for the most honored guests. These seats come with carved backs, additional cushions, and the coveted position that allows occupants to survey the entire gathering while remaining clearly visible to all. The benches extending outward from the high table reflect descending levels of importance, with the most remote seats reserved for the youngest adults and the least influential attendees. But here's where Viking social dynamics get deliciously complicated. The seating isn't entirely predetermined. Your actions, your reputation, your recent achievements or failures can all influence where you ultimately sit. A successful raid might earn you a promotion to a higher bench. A poor harvest might find you seated further from the fire than your invitation originally suggested. The host maintains the delicate balance of honoring established hierarchies while acknowledging the fluid nature of Viking social mobility. The invitation system also serves as a sophisticated intelligence network. By carefully observing who receives invitations, when they arrive, and how they respond, community members can track shifting alliances and emerging conflicts. A suddenly delayed invitation might signal political tensions. An unexpectedly early token could indicate a host's desire to curry favor with a rising power. The messenger's demeanor provides additional clues. Enthusiasm suggests genuine welcome, while formal correctness might hint at obligatory invitations extended to maintain appearances. Women occupy a particularly complex position in this invitation hierarchy. While they rarely receive invitations independently, their influence over their husbands' and sons' acceptances can be considerable. A wise host ensures that invitations reach households where the women are known to be skilled negotiators and influential decision-makers. The most successful Viking wives often serve as unofficial ambassadors, using their social networks to encourage attendance and smooth over potential conflicts before they reach the feast hall. The geographic logistics of invitation delivery reveal the impressive scope of Viking social networks. Messengers might travel for days to reach distant farmsteads, following established routes that connect scattered communities across the Nordic landscape. These delivery journeys serve multiple purposes. They provide opportunities for gathering news, conducting small-scale trade, and maintaining the communication networks that hold Viking society together. The messenger system represents one of the most sophisticated information networks in medieval Europe, rivaling anything available to kings and emperors. As you prepare to respond to your invitation, you realize you're not just planning to attend a feast. You're positioning yourself within a complex web of social relationships that will influence your family's prospects for generations. The wooden token in your hand represents opportunity, obligation, and the endless human desire to belong to something larger than yourself. Your acceptance or refusal will be noted, discussed, and remembered long after the last mead cup has been emptied. You wake before dawn, your breath visible in the cold air that seeps through the wooden walls of your longhouse. Today isn't just another day. It's hunting day, and the success of tomorrow's feast depends entirely on what you and your companions can bring back from the dense forests that stretch beyond your settlement. The anticipation tingles in your fingertips as you reach for your hunting gear, each piece worn smooth by countless expeditions. Your bow feels like an extension of your arm, the leather grip molded by your hand over years of practice. The arrows in your quiver whisper against each other as you move, their iron points catching the faint light from the dying embers of your hearth. The hunting party assembles in the pre-dawn darkness, and you can smell the mixture of pine tar, leather oil, and that particular scent of men who've spent their lives outdoors. There's Eric, whose ability to track deer through snow borders on supernatural, though his tendency to loudly announce every footprint probably scares more game than it attracts. There's Bjorn, whose knowledge of animal behavior comes from decades of patient observation, and young Olaf, whose enthusiasm makes up for his occasional tendency to trip over fallen logs at precisely the wrong moment. The forest welcomes you with its ancient silence, broken only by the soft crunch of snow beneath your feet and the distant call of ravens overhead. You move through the trees with practiced stealth, reading the landscape like a familiar manuscript. Here, the bent grass indicates where deer pause to graze. There, the scratched bark reveals where a boar marked its territory. The forest speaks to those who know its language, and you've spent your lifetime learning its subtle vocabulary. Viking hunting wasn't the casual weekend sport we might imagine today. It represented a sophisticated understanding of animal behavior, seasonal patterns, and forest ecology that modern wildlife biologists still study with admiration. The techniques passed down through generations combined practical knowledge with spiritual beliefs that honored the animals as conscious beings worthy of respect. Before each hunt, ceremonies were performed to ask permission from the forest spirits, acknowledging that taking life required serious justification. You paused beside a stream to examine fresh tracks pressed into the muddy bank. The prints tell a story. A large stag, probably a 10-pointer based on the depth and spread of the hoof prints, passed this way shortly after midnight. The animal was moving slowly, confidently, suggesting it felt secure in this territory. You exchange glances with your hunting companions, and without words, you all understand the day's primary objective has been identified. The tracking begins in earnest now, and you find yourself falling into the meditative rhythm that separates skilled hunters from mere arrow slingers. Your awareness expands beyond your immediate surroundings, encompassing the subtle signs that reveal the invisible highways animals use to navigate their world. Broken twigs at shoulder height indicate the stag's path through dense underbrush. Disturbed leaves show where it paused to investigate interesting scents. The pattern of its movement suggests an animal familiar with human presence, but not yet alarmed by it. Historians still debate whether Viking hunters used systematic game management techniques or simply exploited natural animal populations until they moved to new territories. Archaeological evidence suggests some communities practiced primitive conservation methods, establishing seasonal hunting restrictions and maintaining wildlife refuges around sacred groves. Other scholars argue that the relatively low population density of Scandinavia made such measures unnecessary, allowing Viking hunters to take what they needed without concerning themselves with long-term sustainability. The hunt itself unfolds with patience that would surprise anyone who imagines Vikings as impulsive warriors. You spend hours moving through the forest, following the stag's trail with methodical precision. The animal's route reveals its intimate knowledge of the terrain. It follows ridgelines that offer good visibility, crosses streams at shallow fords, and avoids areas where its scent might linger to attract predators. You're not just hunting an animal. You're engaging in a complex game of strategy with an opponent whose survival depends on outwitting creatures like you. When you finally spot the stag, it's grazing in a small clearing where morning sunlight filters through the canopy overhead. The animal is magnificent, easily the largest deer you've seen this season, with antlers that spread like branching trees above its noble head. For a moment, you simply appreciate the beauty of the creature, understanding why your ancestors believed such animals carried messages between the mortal world and the realm of the gods. The shot requires absolute precision, not just from accuracy considerations, but from respect for the animal's dignity. Viking hunting ethics demanded clean kills that minimized suffering. Missing or wounding game was considered not just poor marksmanship, but a spiritual failing that could bring bad luck to the entire hunting party. You draw your bow with practiced smoothness, feeling the tension build in the yew wood, centering your breathing as you've done hundreds of times before. The arrow flies true, and the stag drops immediately. A clean kill that honors both your skill and the animal sacrifice. The hunting party approaches the fallen deer with reverence, and you begin the ritual prayers that thank the forest spirits for their gift. The animal's death isn't just about providing meat for tomorrow's feast. It's about participating in the endless cycle of life, death, and renewal that governs all existence. Field dressing the deer requires knowledge that extends far beyond simple butchery. You must preserve the hide for leather, save the antlers for tool making, collect the sinew for bowstrings, and prepare the organs for specific culinary uses. Nothing is wasted. Viking hunters understood that respecting their prey meant using every part of the animal in ways that honored its sacrifice. The blood will be saved for sausages, the bones for tools and decorations, even the hooves for glue making. As you prepare to carry your prize back to the settlement, you realize you've participated in something far more complex than a simple hunting expedition. You've engaged with the natural world in ways that connect you to your ancestors, your community, and the spiritual forces that govern Viking existence. Tomorrow's feast will celebrate not just the food you've provided, but the skills, traditions, and relationships that make such abundance possible. You stand in the dimly lit corner of your longhouse, surrounded by the intoxicating aroma of honey, herbs, and something indefinably magical that seems to shimmer in the air around the wooden vats. The process of creating mead isn't just brewing. It's alchemy, transforming simple ingredients into liquid gold that will serve as the sacred bridge between mortal celebration and divine communion. Your hands move with practiced precision as you tend to the fermentation vessels, each one bubbling with life and possibility. The sound is almost musical, a gentle percussion that speaks of transformation happening at the molecular level, though you wouldn't know to call it that. The honey you're working with isn't the standardized sweetener of modern grocery stores. This is wild honey, gathered from forest hives where bees have been crafting their liquid sunlight from the nectar of countless Nordic flowers. Each batch carries the essence of its origins. Clover honey from summer meadows, linden honey from ancient groves, heather honey from moorlands where the wind carries whispers of ancient magic. You can taste the difference with your eyes closed, and experienced mead makers claim they can identify not just the flower sources, but the specific hillsides where the bees gathered their treasure. The fermentation process requires patience that would drive modern instant gratification seekers absolutely mad. You've been nursing these particular batches for months, watching as wild yeasts work their slow magic, converting sugars into alcohol with the deliberate pace of natural processes. The yeasts themselves are part of the mystery. Vikings didn't understand microorganisms, but they recognized that certain locations, certain vessels, certain combinations of ingredients produced consistently better results. The best mead makers guarded their fermentation secrets like military intelligence, passing knowledge through generations of whispered instructions and careful observation. Water quality plays a crucial role that extends far beyond simple purity. The mineral content of your local streams affects fermentation speed, flavor development, and the mead's ultimate character. Spring water from limestone regions produces mead with different characteristics than water filtered through granite or volcanic rock. You've learned to taste water like a sommelier, recognizing the subtle mineral signatures that will influence your final product. Some mead makers traveled considerable distances to obtain water from specific sources, believing that certain springs held spiritual properties that enhanced the drink's sacred qualities. The herbs and spices you add serve multiple purposes beyond flavor enhancement. Metasweet provides natural salicylic acid, which acts as a preservative and mild intoxicant. Juniper berries add their distinctive piney flavor while contributing antimicrobial properties that help prevent spoilage. Bog myrtle, despite its rather unappetizing name, imparts a subtle bitterness that balances the honey's sweetness while adding compounds that enhance the mead's euphoric effects. Each ingredient represents generations of experimentation and accumulated wisdom about which plants complement honey's natural properties. Historians still debate whether Viking mead makers understood the psychoactive properties of their botanical additives or simply observed that certain combinations produced more memorable feast experiences. Archaeological evidence suggests some communities deliberately cultivated specific herbs for brewing purposes, maintaining medicinal gardens that doubled as ingredient sources for ceremonial drinks. The boundary between medicine and intoxication was fluid in Viking culture, with the same plants serving both therapeutic and recreational purposes. The fermentation vessels themselves are works of art, crafted from oak that's been aged and seasoned according to traditions that predate written history. The wood isn't just a container. It's an active participant in the brewing process, contributing tannins and flavor compounds that interact with the honey and herbs in complex ways. You run your hand along the smooth interior of one vessel, feeling the subtle grain patterns that will influence how the mead develops over the coming months. The best vessels are passed down through families, their wooden walls seasoned by decades of use until they become almost sentient brewing partners. Temperature control requires constant attention and an intuitive understanding of fermentation rhythms. Too warm, and the yeasts work too quickly, producing harsh flavors and excessive alcohol. Too cool, and fermentation stalls, leaving you with overly sweet, unstable mead that won't keep through the winter. You've learned to read the subtle signs, the color of the foam, the rhythm of the bubbling, the way the liquid's surface tension changes as fermentation progresses. It's like conducting an orchestra of microorganisms, each batch requiring slightly different timing and attention. The aging process transforms your mead from simple fermented honey into something approaching divine nectar. As months pass, harsh flavors mellow, complex interactions develop between ingredients, and the drink acquires the smooth, sophisticated character that makes it worthy of sacred occasions. You taste each batch regularly, not just for quality control, but to understand how time and patience create depth and complexity that can't be rushed. The best meads improve for years, developing characteristics that surprise even experienced brewers. The final product serves purposes that extend far beyond simple intoxication. Mead facilitates social bonding, loosens tongues for storytelling, and provides the liquid courage necessary for oath-making and conflict resolution. The alcohol content is carefully calibrated to enhance sociability without rendering participants incapable of making important decisions. You've learned to create different strengths for different occasions. Lighter meads for lengthy celebrations, stronger varieties for ceremonial toasts, and the truly potent brews reserved for the most sacred rituals. As you prepare to transport your finished mead to tomorrow's feast, you realize you've created more than an alcoholic beverage. You've crafted liquid community, bottled tradition, and fermented the very essence of what makes human gatherings sacred. The mead will flow tomorrow not just as drink, but as the golden thread that weaves individual guests into a unified celebration of life, kinship, and the enduring power of human connection. You approach the great hall as twilight paints the sky in shades of amber and deep purple, and you can feel the weight of anticipation settling over the gathering crowd like a warm cloak. The torches flanking the massive oak doors flicker in the evening breeze, casting dancing shadows that seem to beckon you forward into something far more significant than a simple meal. Your invitation token feels warm against your chest, its carved symbols a tangible reminder that you're about to cross the threshold from ordinary evening into sacred time. The murmur of conversations around you creates a gentle symphony of excitement, punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter that suggests someone's already been sampling the evening's libations. The entrance ceremony begins before you even reach the doors, as guests naturally organize themselves into the subtle hierarchies that will govern the evening's interactions. You notice how the most prominent families cluster near the front, their finest clothing and jewelry catching the torchlight like miniature constellations. The women wear their best brooches, massive silver pieces that serve as both decoration and proclamation of their household's prosperity. The men's arm rings gleam with the dull luster of well-maintained silver, each band representing successful raids, profitable trades, or political alliances that extend their influence beyond their immediate communities. The hall's threshold itself holds profound spiritual significance, and you pause momentarily as you approach, feeling the invisible boundary between the mundane world and the sacred space of the feast. Vikings believed that doorways were liminal spaces where the normal rules of existence became fluid, where mortals could more easily communicate with gods and spirits. The massive wooden doors, carved with protective runes and mythological scenes, serve as both physical barriers and spiritual gateways. You can almost sense the accumulated energy of countless previous celebrations, the echoes of oaths sworn, alliances forged, and stories told within these walls. As you step across the threshold, the hall's atmosphere envelopes you like a living thing. The air is thick with the scent of pine smoke, roasted meat, and that distinctive aroma of many bodies gathered in close quarters. Though thankfully, Viking hygiene standards were considerably higher than medieval stereotypes suggest. The temperature inside is noticeably warmer than the cool evening air, heated by the great fire and the collective presence of dozens of guests. The acoustic properties of the space become immediately apparent as conversations blend into a pleasant hum that somehow manages to be both intimate and communal. The formal greeting ritual begins as you present your invitation token to the designated herald, a role that combines practical organization with ceremonial importance. The herald isn't just checking credentials. He's announcing your arrival to the assembled guests, proclaiming your lineage, your recent achievements, and your relationship to the host. This public recognition serves multiple purposes. It establishes your place in the social hierarchy. It provides conversation starters for other guests, and it demonstrates the host's extensive network of relationships. Your moment of introduction feels both nerve-wracking and deeply affirming, as your accomplishments are proclaimed to a room full of your peers. The gift-giving ceremony follows immediately, and you step forward to present your offering to the host with a formality that reflects the evening's sacred nature. Your gift, a beautifully crafted knife with an elk bone handle, represents hours of careful consideration and skilled craftsmanship. The presentation isn't merely polite. It's a public declaration of your respect for the host and your commitment to the reciprocal obligations that bind Viking society together. The host receives your gift with elaborate courtesy, examining it with genuine appreciation before passing it to assistants who will display it with the other offerings. Historians still debate whether these gift exchanges represent genuine generosity or calculated political investments, but the ceremony itself clearly serves to reinforce social bonds and demonstrate each participant's prosperity. The hand-washing ritual that follows might seem like simple hygiene, but it carries deeper symbolic meaning about purification and preparation for sacred activity. Servants present you with bronze bowls filled with warm water scented with herbs, and you perform the cleansing with deliberate care. The water itself has been blessed according to ancient traditions, and the act of washing your hands represents a conscious transition from the ordinary concerns of daily life to the elevated state of mind appropriate for feast participation. The clean linen towels are embroidered with protective symbols, and you notice how each guest performs the ritual with similar solemnity. Your escort to your designated seat reflects the evening's careful choreography, as you're guided through the hall by someone whose knowledge of social precedents rivals that of any royal court. The placement of guests isn't random, but follows complex protocols that balance traditional hierarchies with current political realities. You're pleased to discover your seat is positioned where you can easily observe the evening's entertainment while maintaining comfortable conversation distance from compatible neighbors. The bench itself is surprisingly comfortable, padded with carefully tanned furs and positioned to provide optimal views of both the high table and the central fire. The blessing ceremony that formally opens the feast creates a moment of profound stillness in the bustling hall. The designated priest, or in some communities, the host himself, raises a ceremonial horn filled with the evening's first mead, and the assembled guests fall silent in recognition of the sacred nature of the moment. The words of blessing invoke protection for the gathering, gratitude for the abundance being shared, and request for divine favor on the community's future endeavors. The silence that follows feels pregnant with possibility, as if the assembled guests are collectively holding their breath in anticipation of the evening's unfolding magic. As the formal ceremonies conclude and the feast proper begins, you settle into your place with a deep sense of satisfaction and anticipation. The arrival ceremony has successfully transformed you from an individual guest into a participating member of a temporary community bound together by shared rituals, mutual obligations, and the ancient human need to celebrate life's abundance in the company of others. The evening stretches ahead like an uncharted territory, full of stories to be told, connections to be made, and memories to be created that will warm your heart through the long winter months ahead. You settle onto your designated bench, and immediately you understand that this isn't just furniture. It's a carefully engineered piece of social architecture that communicates your exact position in the complex web of Viking society. The bench creaks pleasantly under your weight, the sound joining a gentle symphony of settling wood as dozens of other guests find their places throughout the hall. Your spot is neither too close to the high table nor embarrassingly distant, a placement that suggests you're respected but not intimidating. Basically the Viking equivalent of being seated at table 6 instead of table 1 at a wedding, which honestly feels about right. The seating arrangement follows protocols so intricate they would make modern wedding planners weep with envy and frustration. At the head of the hall, the high table sits elevated on a wooden platform that raises the most honored guests just enough above the crowd to emphasize their importance without creating an unbridgeable gap. The Jarl occupies the central position, his massive carved chair adorned with silver fittings that catch the firelight with each subtle movement. To his right sits his wife, her position reflecting not just courtesy, but genuine political power. Viking women held significantly more authority than their counterparts in other medieval societies, and the seating arrangements acknowledge this reality. The benches extending outward from the high table create a complex geography of status, with each row representing a different tier of social importance. You notice how the positioning takes into account not just wealth and title, but recent achievements, family connections, and the subtle alliances that shift with each passing season. The successful merchant who funded the new harbor sits closer to the fire than the old warrior whose glory days have faded into comfortable retirement. The young skald whose poems have been gaining popularity enjoys a surprisingly prominent position, while the farmer whose harvests have been consistently disappointing finds himself relegated to the outer circles where the shadows dance more boldly. The spacing between benches serves multiple practical and social purposes that reveal sophisticated understanding of group dynamics. The distances are carefully calculated to allow servants to move freely between tables while preventing casual eavesdropping on conversations at neighboring benches. You can speak privately with your immediate companions without your words carrying to the next table, but raising your voice slightly allows you to join broader conversations that span multiple seating areas. It's acoustic engineering designed to facilitate both intimate discussions and communal experiences, depending on the moment's requirements. The construction of the benches themselves reflects the host's attention to guest comfort and his ability to provide quality furnishings. Your bench is crafted from seasoned oak, its surface worn smooth by countless previous feasts but still solid and stable. The wood grain forms subtle patterns that catch the firelight, creating an almost hypnotic effect as the flames flicker and dance. Cushions stuffed with down and covered in finely woven wool provide surprising comfort for extended sitting, while carved armrests offer support during the longest storytelling sessions. Behind the apparent simplicity of the seating arrangement lies a complex negotiation of competing interests and delicate egos that would challenge the most skilled diplomat. Certain individuals cannot be seated near each other due to ongoing feuds or business disputes. Others must be positioned to facilitate important conversations or potential alliance negotiations. The host has spent considerable time mapping out these relationships, consulting with advisors and family members to ensure the evening proceeds without social disasters. Historians still debate whether Viking feast planners developed formal protocols for seating arrangements or relied primarily on intuitive understanding of community dynamics. The view from your bench provides an excellent perspective on the evening's unfolding drama, as you can observe both the high table's formal interactions and the more relaxed conversations occurring at tables throughout the hall. The central fire pit dominates your field of vision, its flames creating a hypnotic focal point that draws all eyes periodically throughout the evening. The smoke rises in lazy spirals toward the roof opening, carrying with it the mingled aromas of burning wood, roasted meat, and the subtle incense that's been added to enhance the sacred atmosphere. Your table companions have been selected with care that extends beyond simple compatibility. The man to your left is a successful trader whose stories of distant markets and foreign customs promise to entertain throughout the evening. The woman to your right manages her household's textile production and possesses detailed knowledge of the intricate social networks that bind local families together. Across from you sits a young warrior whose recent exploits have earned him considerable local fame, though his tendency to embellish his adventures means you'll need to apply a generous discount to his more dramatic claims. The serving arrangements reflect the same hierarchical considerations that govern seating, with the most honored guests receiving attention from the most skilled and experienced servants. You notice how the servers move through the hall with practiced efficiency, their timing coordinated to ensure everyone receives food and drink without creating bottlenecks or uncomfortable delays. The quality of the serving vessels varies according to guest status. Those at the high table eat from silver platters and drink from decorated horns, while your level merits well-crafted wooden bowls and cups that are functional and attractive without being ostentatious. As you survey your surroundings and begin conversations with your table mates, You realize that your seating position perfectly reflects your place in the community's social ecosystem. You're included among the people who matter, positioned to participate in important discussions, and treated with the respect due to someone whose contributions are valued. The bench beneath you isn't just a place to sit. It's a carefully considered statement about your worth, your relationships, and your role in the complex social machinery that keeps Viking society functioning smoothly. The evening stretches ahead with promise, and you settle in with the comfortable anticipation that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong in this temporary community of celebration and fellowship. You watch as the Jarl rises from his ornate chair, the silver fittings catching firelight like captured starlight, and the entire hall falls into a reverent silence that feels almost sacred. The massive drinking horn in his hands gleams with polished amber and silver bands, each ring representing a successful campaign or profitable alliance. This isn't just any cup. It's a ceremonial vessel that's witnessed more oaths than a courthouse and probably seen more drama than a modern soap opera. The horn itself comes from an aurochs, one of those massive wild cattle that your ancestors hunted when the world was younger and considerably more dangerous, back when getting your protein required genuine, life-threatening adventure. The weight of tradition settles over the hall like a comfortable blanket as the opening toast ceremony begins. Every eye focuses on the Jarl as he lifts the horn toward the smoke hole in the roof, where tendrils of fire smoke spiral upward into the star-filled darkness beyond. His voice carries clearly through the acoustically perfect space as he speaks the ancient words that transform this gathering from mere social event into sacred ritual. The toast isn't just about drinking. It's about binding the assembled guests together through shared participation in ceremonies that connect them to their ancestors, their gods, and each other. The first toast always honors the gods, acknowledging the divine forces that govern war, weather, and the prosperity that makes such abundance possible. You feel the collective intake of breath as the Jarl invokes Odin's wisdom, Thor's protection, and Frey's blessing on the harvest that provides tonight's feast. The words carry weight that extends beyond mere superstition. In a world where survival depends on favorable weather, successful raids, and community cooperation, invoking divine support represents practical insurance as much as spiritual devotion. The horn passes to his right, following protocols that ensure the blessing reaches everyone present in proper hierarchical order. When the horn reaches your section of the hall, you accept it with both hands, feeling the smooth surface warmed by dozens of previous holders. The mead inside tastes of summer flowers and ancient traditions, its subtle sweetness enhanced by herbs that tingle pleasantly on your tongue. You speak your own brief blessing before drinking, adding your voice to the communal prayer that weaves individual guests into a unified spiritual community. The alcohol content is perfectly calibrated to enhance sociability without compromising judgment. After all, you'll be making important promises before the evening ends, and nobody wants to wake up having sworn allegiance to someone's goat. The oath-making ceremony that follows the opening toast represents the evening's most serious business, as warriors and community leaders use the sacred atmosphere to formalize alliances, settle disputes, and make commitments that will shape the coming year. You watch as pairs of men stand before the assembly, their hands clasped over drawn swords while they speak the binding words that will govern their future relationships. These aren't casual promises, but sacred contracts enforced by divine witnesses and community pressure. Breaking an oath sworn during a feast carries consequences that extend far beyond simple social embarrassment. The specific language of oath-making follows formulas refined over generations, with each word chosen for precision and ceremonial power. The oaths typically involve mutual support during conflicts, shared responsibility for community defense, and agreements about trade relationships or marriage alliances. You listen as one young warrior swears to support his older companion in a land dispute, while the older man promises to provide guidance and backup during the younger one's first major raid. The reciprocal nature of these agreements creates networks of obligation that hold Viking society together across vast geographic distances. Historians still debate whether these feast oaths carried legal weight equivalent to formal contracts or represented primarily social and spiritual commitments enforced through community pressure. Archaeological evidence suggests some oaths were recorded on rune stones or wooden tokens, indicating their importance extended beyond the immediate ceremonial context. The presence of weapons during oath-making ceremonies adds symbolic weight, as the drawn blades represent the violence that awaits oath-breakers while simultaneously honoring the martial culture that defines Viking identity. The drinking rituals that accompany oath-making serve multiple purposes beyond simple celebration. The shared mead creates physical and spiritual bonds between participants, while the alcohol's mild euphoric effects help ease the anxiety that naturally accompanies serious commitments. The ceremonial vessels themselves become part of the binding process, as drinking from the same horn symbolizes the unity being created through the oath. Some particularly elaborate ceremonies involve mixing blood with the mead, though thankfully tonight's festivities seem to be sticking with the standard alcoholic version. Women participate in the oath-making ceremonies as both witnesses and active participants, their presence lending additional gravity to the proceedings. Viking women could own property, initiate divorce, and enter into business partnerships, rights that extended to oath-making privileges during feast ceremonies. You notice how the Jarl's wife observes each oath with careful attention, her approval or disapproval carrying weight that could influence the community's acceptance of the agreements being made. Her knowledge of family histories and property relationships makes her counsel valuable for evaluating the wisdom of proposed alliances. As the formal oath-making concludes and the horn begins another circuit of the hall, you realize you've witnessed something far more significant than drinking rituals. You've observed the fundamental process through which Viking society creates and maintains the social bonds that allow scattered communities to function as a coherent culture. The oaths sworn tonight will influence everything from trade relationships to military alliances, from marriage negotiations to inheritance disputes. The mead in your cup isn't just alcohol. It's liquid social contract, fermented community solidarity, and the essential lubricant that keeps the complex machinery of Viking civilization running smoothly. You lean back against the comfortable padding of your bench as the hall transforms into something magical. A living theater where stories breathe and legends take flight on wings of carefully chosen words. The skald stands near the central fire, his figure silhouetted against the dancing flames like something conjured from the smoke itself. He's not particularly imposing physically. Actually, he's rather slight, with the pale complexion of someone who spends more time crafting words than wielding swords. But when he opens his mouth, the entire hall falls under a spell that makes Hollywood special effects look like amateur hour with shadow puppets. The storytelling tradition represents far more than mere entertainment. It's the Viking version of library, newspaper, and sacred text all rolled into one mesmerizing performance. These oral historians carry within their memories the accumulated wisdom of generations, preserving genealogies that stretch back to mythical times, recording property disputes with legal precision, and maintaining the cultural knowledge that holds Norse society together. The skald's mind is a living archive, storing thousands of verses in complex poetic meters that serve as both mnemonic devices and artistic achievements. You marvel at the intellectual feat this represents, considering that a single mistake could alter family histories or distort important legal precedents. The performance begins with the traditional opening formulas, ritualistic phrases that signal the transition from ordinary conversation to sacred storytelling time. The skald's voice carries easily through the hall's acoustic perfection, reaching every listener with crystal clarity while maintaining the intimate quality that makes each person feel personally addressed. His words paint pictures so vivid you can almost see the scenes unfolding in the fire's dancing flames. Mighty ships cutting through storm-tossed seas, heroes facing impossible odds with grim determination, and gods walking among mortals in the misty dawn of the world. Tonight's featured tale recounts the adventures of a legendary hero whose exploits perfectly balance historical possibility with mythological grandeur. The Skald weaves together familiar elements, treacherous voyages, supernatural encounters, and displays of superhuman courage, while subtly incorporating recent events and local personalities that make the ancient story feel immediately relevant. You notice how certain descriptions seem to reference recent political developments, how some character traits mirror those of prominent community members, and how the hero's challenges echo the difficulties facing your own settlement. The poetic structure itself represents a sophisticated art form that scholars still struggle to fully understand. The verses follow complex rules governing meter, alliteration, and internal rhyming patterns that create a hypnotic rhythm perfectly suited to memorization and oral transmission. Historians still debate whether these poetic forms developed primarily as memory aids or artistic expressions, but their effectiveness is undeniable. You find yourself unconsciously swaying to the verbal rhythm, your breathing automatically synchronizing with the skald's measured delivery. The audience participates in the storytelling through responses, interruptions, and emotional reactions that transform the performance from monologue into communal experience. When a hero faces a particularly daunting challenge, you hear murmurs of encouragement from around the hall. When he demonstrates exceptional cleverness, appreciative chuckles ripple through the crowd. The skald skillfully manages these interactions, using audience energy to enhance dramatic moments while maintaining narrative momentum. It's like being part of the world's most sophisticated live-action audiobook, where everyone gets to be both audience and supporting cast. The stories serve multiple social functions beyond entertainment, operating as vehicles for moral instruction, legal precedent, and cultural reinforcement. Through tales of heroic behavior, listeners learn the values their society prizes most highly. Through accounts of divine justice, they understand the consequences of breaking social codes. Through epic adventures, they absorb practical knowledge about navigation, combat, and survival in hostile environments. The skald isn't just telling stories. He's conducting a masterclass in Viking cultural literacy disguised as entertainment. The integration of historical fact with mythological elements creates narratives that operate on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface, you're hearing exciting adventure stories filled with supernatural elements and larger-than-life characters. But deeper analysis reveals sophisticated commentary on contemporary political situations, religious beliefs, and social tensions. The skald's skill lies in crafting tales that satisfy listeners seeking simple entertainment while providing rich material for those who understand the cultural codes embedded in every verse. As the evening progresses, you notice how the storytelling adapts to the audience's changing mood and attention levels. Early tales feature complex plots and subtle character development that reward careful listening. Later stories become more dramatic and emotionally direct, designed to maintain engagement as the mead takes effect and attention spans naturally decrease. The skald reads the room like a master performer, adjusting his delivery and content selection to maintain optimal connection with his audience throughout the long evening. The preservation of these stories represents one of humanity's most remarkable intellectual achievements, as generations of skalds have maintained vast libraries of oral literature without benefit of written records. Each storyteller must master not only the basic narratives, but also dozens of variations, regional differences, and personal interpretations that allow for creative expression within traditional frameworks. The responsibility is enormous. A single skald's memory might contain the only surviving versions of stories crucial to community identity and legal authority. As the current tale reaches its climactic conclusion, you realize you've experienced something far more profound than simple entertainment. You've participated in the living transmission of cultural DNA, witnessed the process by which societies preserve and transform their essential knowledge across generations. The stories echoing in your mind will influence your understanding of heroism, community responsibility, and the proper relationship between humans and the divine forces that shape their world. You breathe in the intoxicating aromas that begin wafting from the kitchen areas, and your stomach responds with an enthusiasm that probably violates several laws of physics. The scents aren't just food. They're liquid poetry, an olfactory symphony that tells the story of a cuisine far more sophisticated than any Hollywood Viking movie would dare suggest. The air carries hints of roasted game, herbs that grow only in Nordic meadows, and spices that traveled impossible distances to reach this remote hall. Your mouth waters as you realize that everything you thought you knew about medieval cooking is about to be deliciously, thoroughly demolished. The first course arrives with ceremonial fanfare that would make modern food photographers weep with envy. Servants bearing massive wooden platters move through the hall with practiced grace, their timing coordinated to ensure every table receives attention simultaneously. The presentation alone represents an art form. Carved vegetables arranged in geometric patterns, roasted meats glistening with herb-infused glazes, and sauces that gleam like liquid jewels in the firelight. This isn't peasant food grudgingly consumed for survival. This is culinary artistry that reflects both the host's prosperity and the sophisticated palates of Viking society. The centerpiece of the evening is the magnificent stag you helped hunt earlier, now transformed through hours of careful preparation into something approaching edible sculpture. The meat has been roasted to perfection, its exterior crackling with herbs and rendered fat, while the interior remains tender and succulent. The preparation follows techniques passed down through generations, combining practical cooking knowledge with ritualistic elements that honor the animal sacrifice. You notice how the carving is performed with ceremonial precision, each slice accompanied by brief prayers that acknowledge the deer's gift to the assembled community. But the real surprise lies in the sophisticated flavor combinations that challenge every stereotype about medieval cuisine. The venison is accompanied by a sauce made from wild berries, honey, and fermented fish that creates a complex umami richness you never expected. Root vegetables have been roasted with herbs that provide both flavor and subtle medicinal properties. Even the bread represents a marvel of Viking ingenuity. Dense, dark loaves made from multiple grains and flavored with seeds that add both nutrition and textural interest. Apparently, your ancestors understood food chemistry better than you gave them credit for. The seafood course showcases the Viking mastery of preservation techniques that allowed communities to enjoy ocean bounty even in landlocked settlements. Salmon that was caught months ago during the spring runs has been transformed through smoking and salt curing into delicacies that rival anything modern chefs can produce. The fish flakes apart in perfect sections, its flesh dense with concentrated flavors that speak of clean northern waters and expert preservation methods. Historians still debate whether Viking fish preservation techniques were developed independently or learned through trade contacts with other maritime cultures, but the results speak for themselves. The dairy offerings reveal another aspect of Viking culinary sophistication that often gets overlooked in popular representations. Fresh cheese has been aged in underground storage areas where consistent temperatures and natural bacteria create complex flavors that modern artisanal cheesemakers would recognize and respect. Fermented butter, thick and slightly tangy, provides rich accompaniment to the dark bread. Even the milk served tonight has been enhanced with honey and herbs, creating a beverage that's both nourishing and surprisingly elegant. The vegetable preparations demonstrate knowledge of nutrition and flavor enhancement that extends far beyond simple boiling. Cabbage has been fermented into something resembling modern sauerkraut, providing essential vitamins during the long winter months while adding acidic brightness that cuts through the evening's rich meats. Wild mushrooms, gathered from secret forest locations and carefully prepared to eliminate toxins, contribute earthy depths that complement the game meats perfectly. Root vegetables have been roasted until their natural sugars caramelize, creating sweet counterpoints to the meal's savory elements. The seasoning represents perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of Viking cuisine, as spices and herbs are combined with scientific precision to enhance both flavor and preservation. Salt, precious as silver in inland communities, is used sparingly but effectively to intensify natural flavors. Wild herbs provide antimicrobial properties that help prevent food poisoning while adding complex aromatic elements. Even black pepper, expensive as gold and traded across vast distances, appears in carefully measured quantities that demonstrate both wealth and culinary knowledge. The serving protocols reflect the same attention to hierarchy and social dynamics that govern every other aspect of the feast. The choicest cuts go to the high table, while your section receives portions that are generous and well-prepared but clearly reflect your middle-tier status. The quality differences aren't dramatic. Everyone eats well tonight, but the subtle variations in portion size and cut selection reinforce the social structures that organize Viking society. It's like being at a really fancy restaurant where your table location determines whether you get the prime rib end cut or the slightly less premium middle section. As you savor each carefully prepared bite, you realize you're experiencing cuisine that represents centuries of accumulated knowledge about nutrition, preservation, flavor enhancement, and presentation. The meal isn't just about satisfying hunger. It's about demonstrating cultural sophistication, honoring the sources of abundance, and creating shared experiences that bind communities together through the fundamental human pleasure of eating exceptional food prepared with skill and care. You watch as the first exchange unfolds with the precision of a diplomatic ballet, each gesture carrying weight that extends far beyond the simple act of passing objects between hands. The gift-giving ceremony transforms the feast hall into a theater of political maneuvering, where beautifully crafted items serve as both symbols of respect and carefully coded messages about alliances, obligations, and future expectations. Your hands rest comfortably on your drinking horn as you observe the intricate dance of generosity that's about to reshape the political landscape of your community, assuming someone doesn't accidentally insult someone else's goat in the process. The Jarl rises from his seat, holding a magnificent silver arm ring that catches the firelight like captured moonbeams. This isn't just jewelry. It's currency, status symbol, and political statement all forged into one elegant circle of precious metal. The arm ring represents weeks of skilled labor, rare materials traded across vast distances, and wealth accumulated through successful raids or shrewd negotiations. As he presents it to a visiting chieftain from a neighboring settlement, you understand you're witnessing the formation of an alliance that could influence trade routes, military cooperation, and marriage negotiations for the next generation. The recipient's response reveals the sophisticated etiquette that governs these exchanges, as he examines the gift with appropriate reverence before offering his own reciprocal present. The timing of his response, the expressions crossing his face, even the way he holds the arm ring. All these details communicate messages that the assembled guests read like text. Too much enthusiasm might suggest desperation, while insufficient appreciation could be interpreted as disdain. The dance requires perfect calibration of emotion and gesture, making it more challenging than any military campaign. The gifts themselves tell stories that reveal the vast networks connecting Viking communities across impossible distances. You spot amber beads from Baltic shores, intricate metalwork that bears the hallmarks of Irish craftsmen, silk fabric that traveled the length of Europe from Byzantine markets, and carved walrus ivory that originated in the far northern reaches where summer never quite arrives. Each item represents not just material value, but the relationships, knowledge, and adventures that brought it to this remote hall. It's like observing an ancient version of international trade, where every exchange strengthens the invisible threads that bind distant communities together. Women participate prominently in the gift-giving ceremonies, their exchanges often focusing on textile arts that showcase both practical skills and artistic vision. The elaborately embroidered cloaks, intricately woven belts, and magnificently decorated brooches represent hundreds of hours of meticulous work that transforms functional items into objects of beauty. Historians still debate whether these textile gifts carried symbolic meanings beyond their obvious material value, but the care invested in their creation clearly communicates respect and dedication that transcends simple economic exchange. The presentation protocols follow hierarchical rules that ensure everyone receives appropriate recognition while maintaining social order. Gifts flow primarily from lower status individuals toward their superiors, creating visible demonstrations of loyalty and respect. However, the most powerful guests are expected to reciprocate with generosity that reflects their elevated positions, creating cycles of exchange that redistribute wealth while reinforcing existing power structures. It's essentially an ancient version of corporate gift-giving, but with considerably higher stakes and much better craftsmanship. The quality and appropriateness of gifts serve as public evaluations of each participant's wealth, taste, and political sophistication. Offering something too modest suggests either poverty or disrespect, while presenting overly lavish gifts might be interpreted as showing off or attempting to overshadow the host. The sweet spot requires careful calculation of your own status, your relationship to the recipient, and the overall tone of the evening's exchanges. You're grateful your own contributions were well received earlier, avoiding the social mortification that comes with gift-giving miscalculations. The weapons presented during these ceremonies carry particular significance, as they represent both practical tools and symbolic statements about trust and martial prowess. A beautifully crafted sword given to a young warrior signals confidence in his potential while creating obligations for future support. Ornate axes presented to established fighters acknowledge their proven capabilities while strengthening bonds of mutual loyalty. The exchange of weapons also serves practical purposes, as superior craftsmanship and materials can mean the difference between life and death in combat situations. The record-keeping aspect of gift exchanges reveals sophisticated systems for tracking obligations and relationships across extended time periods. While Vikings rarely used written records, the community's collective memory preserves detailed accounts of who gave what to whom, when reciprocal obligations remain unfulfilled, and how current exchanges fit into longer patterns of relationship building. This oral database of social debt and credit influences everything from marriage negotiations to military alliances, creating accountability systems that span generations. As the formal gift-giving concludes and the presents are carefully arranged for display, you realize you've witnessed something far more complex than simple generosity. You've observed the fundamental economic and political machinery that keeps Viking society functioning across vast distances and diverse communities. The beautiful objects changing hands tonight represent investment portfolios, diplomatic treaties, and insurance policies all combined into elegant packages that please the eye while serving essential social functions. The evening's abundance reflects not just individual prosperity, but the collective success of communities that have learned to transform competition into cooperation through the ancient magic of reciprocal gift-giving. You feel the rhythmic pulse beginning to build in your chest as the first notes of a wooden flute drift through the smoke-filled air, joined by the deep thrumming of stretched high drums that seem to echo your own heartbeat. The music doesn't just fill the hall, it inhabits it, seeping into the wooden beams and settling into your bones with an intimacy that makes you wonder if Vikings invented the first surround sound system centuries before anyone thought to patent it. The musicians, positioned strategically around the central fire, create layers of sound that weave together like invisible threads, binding the assembled guests into a single, breathing organism of collective celebration. The instrumental ensemble represents a sophisticated understanding of acoustics and group psychology that would impress modern sound engineers. Bone flutes carved from swan wings produce haunting melodies that dance above the rhythmic foundation, while ram's horn trumpets add dramatic punctuation that makes everyone's pulse quicken with anticipation. The drums themselves are works of art, massive instruments crafted from whole tree trunks and covered with carefully prepared hides that have been stretched and tuned with mathematical precision. The sound they produce resonates through the hall's wooden structure, creating vibrations you feel as much as hear. The first dancers emerge from the crowd with movements that blend martial arts, storytelling, and pure athletic expression into something that makes modern interpretive dance look like enthusiastic flailing. These aren't random party moves. They're codified sequences that preserve cultural memory through physical motion, telling stories of heroic battles, successful hunts, and mythological encounters between gods and mortals. You watch, mesmerized, as the dancers' bodies become living manuscripts, their gestures spelling out narratives that have been passed down through generations of carefully trained performers. The competitive element begins to emerge as individual dancers step forward to demonstrate their skills, each performance building on the previous one, while adding personal flair that keeps the audience guessing. The competition isn't formal. There are no judges holding up scorecards, but the crowd's reactions clearly indicate winners and losers in this ancient dance-off. You find yourself unconsciously keeping score, cheering for particularly impressive leaps, and groaning sympathetically when someone's ambitious spin ends in a less-than-graceful landing that would definitely earn points for entertainment value, if not technical excellence. The singing that accompanies the dancing reveals the sophisticated musical traditions that preserve both entertainment and essential cultural information. These aren't simple folk songs, but complex compositions that require years of training to master properly. The vocal techniques include harmonic arrangements that create haunting resonances, rhythmic patterns that synchronize with the dancing, and poetic structures that allow for improvisation within traditional frameworks. Historians still debate whether Viking musical notation existed or whether these elaborate compositions were preserved entirely through oral tradition. But the complexity of tonight's performances suggests musical literacy far beyond simple campfire singing. Women's participation in the musical celebrations reflects their prominent role in preserving and transmitting cultural traditions. The female voices soar above the male chorus, creating ethereal harmonies that seem to channel otherworldly forces into the earthly celebration. Their songs often focus on themes of domestic life, seasonal cycles, and the intimate human experiences that balance the martial emphasis of male-dominated narratives. The interplay between male and female vocal traditions creates musical conversations that explore the full spectrum of Viking cultural values and social relationships. The instrumental solos provide opportunities for individual musicians to showcase technical skills that rival anything modern conservatory training can produce. You listen in amazement as a young woman coaxes impossibly complex melodies from a simple wooden harp, her fingers dancing across the strings with precision that would make professional musicians weep with envy. The audience responds with appreciative murmurs that encourage increasingly elaborate performances, creating an impromptu masterclass in advanced musical technique disguised as entertainment. The integration of music with storytelling creates multimedia experiences that engage multiple senses simultaneously. The skald's narrative verses are enhanced by musical accompaniment that provides emotional underscore, dramatic emphasis, and rhythmic structure that aids memorization. Specific musical themes become associated with particular characters or situations, creating leitmotifs that help listeners follow complex narrative threads through lengthy recitations. It's like experiencing the world's first movie soundtrack, where music and story combine to create emotional impact that neither could achieve independently. The dancing competitions escalate into increasingly spectacular displays of athleticism and creativity that transform the hall into an ancient Olympic arena. Dancers attempt moves that require incredible strength, flexibility, and coordination, while the crowd offers encouragement that occasionally borders on the slightly inappropriate. You're particularly impressed by one performer whose acrobatic sequence involves multiple backflips followed by a perfect landing that somehow incorporates a dramatic pose worthy of any modern gymnastics routine, though hopefully with better costume security than some of tonight's more enthusiastic participants. As the musical celebration reaches its crescendo, with dozens of voices joining in harmonies that seem to lift the very roof beams toward the stars, you realize you're experiencing something far more profound than entertainment. You're participating in the fundamental human impulse to transform individual existence into collective celebration, to use rhythm, melody, and movement to create temporary communities that transcend the ordinary boundaries of daily life. The music flowing around you isn't just sound. It's liquid connection, fermented joy, and the ancient technology that humans developed to synchronize their hearts and souls in moments of shared abundance. You notice the subtle shift in atmosphere as the women begin to take center stage, their movements carrying an authority that transforms the entire dynamic of the evening's celebration. The flickering firelight catches the silver threads woven through their finest gowns, creating patterns that seem to dance independently of their bodies as they glide between tables with the confidence of born diplomats. These aren't medieval wallflowers waiting for male permission to participate. They're the architects of tonight's social success, the invisible engineers whose careful planning and strategic thinking have transformed a simple meal into a sophisticated political and cultural event. The hostess herself commands attention without demanding it. Her presence felt throughout the hall, even when she's not speaking. You watch as she navigates between groups of guests, her conversations brief but purposeful, each interaction carefully calculated to advance the evening's larger objectives. She remembers everyone's family connections, recent business ventures, and personal preferences with accuracy that would make modern database software jealous. Her knowledge extends beyond simple social pleasantries to include detailed understanding of trade relationships, property disputes, and the complex web of obligations that bind Viking communities together across vast distances. The serving coordination reveals the sophisticated logistics management that women wielded in Viking society as they orchestrate the movement of food, drink, and entertainment with precision that rivals modern event planning. You marvel at how seamlessly courses appear and disappear, how drinks are refilled before cups empty, and how the timing of entertainment perfectly complements the meal's natural rhythms. This isn't accidental. It's the result of detailed planning sessions that would probably put modern wedding coordinators to shame, assuming they could handle the additional complexity of managing armed guests who might break into impromptu sword fights. The women's role in gift exchange ceremonies demonstrates their economic influence and political sophistication, as they evaluate offerings with expertise that reflects deep understanding of craftsmanship, material value, and symbolic significance. Their approval or subtle disapproval can make or break alliances. Their recommendations carry weight that influences major decisions, and their network of relationships often provides the foundation for diplomatic negotiations. You observe how younger women learn these skills through careful observation, absorbing lessons in evaluation, negotiation, and strategic thinking that will serve them throughout their lives. The textile displays organized by the women showcase artistic achievements that challenge any assumptions about medieval creative limitations. The embroidered wall hangings tell stories as complex as any skald's verses, their intricate patterns preserving genealogies, property boundaries, and spiritual beliefs in visual form that complements the oral traditions. The quality of workmanship represents thousands of hours of skilled labor. with techniques passed down through generations of women who understood that creating beauty was both practical necessity and cultural expression. Historians still debate the extent of women's formal political power in Viking society, but tonight's evidence suggests their influence operated through sophisticated and formal networks that may have been more effective than official political structures. The women's conversations weave together information about harvests, trade opportunities, and potential conflicts with efficiency that would make modern intelligence agencies envious. Their recommendations about marriages, business partnerships, and strategic alliances carry weight that clearly influences the men's official decision-making processes. The brewing and food preparation expertise displayed tonight reflects knowledge systems that women controlled and transmitted across generations. The complex flavor combinations, preservation techniques, and presentation artistry represent scientific understanding disguised as domestic skill. You realize that the women's knowledge encompasses chemistry, biology, nutrition, and medicine in ways that wouldn't be formally recognized by academic institutions for centuries. Their expertise keeps communities healthy, well-fed, and culturally sophisticated in environments where such knowledge literally means the difference between survival and extinction. The childcare arrangements during the feast demonstrate organizational skills that ensure even the youngest community members can participate appropriately in cultural celebrations. The children aren't simply relegated to separate areas, but are integrated into the evening's activities in ways that provide entertainment while serving as educational opportunities. You notice how the women coordinate supervision duties, share responsibilities, and create learning experiences that transmit cultural values through participation rather than formal instruction. The conflict resolution skills that women display throughout the evening reveal diplomatic talents that often prevent disputes from escalating into violence. When tensions arise between guests, and they inevitably do when you combine alcohol, weapons, and masculine pride in confined spaces, the women intervene with subtle interventions that redirect aggressive energy into more productive channels. Their techniques include strategic redirection of conversations, careful rearrangement of seating, and deployment of entertainment that defuses potentially dangerous situations. As you observe these remarkable women managing the complex social machinery that keeps the feast running smoothly, you begin to understand that Viking society's success depended as much on female leadership as on male martial prowess. The evening's abundance reflects not just hunting skills and military success, but the sophisticated domestic management that transforms raw resources into cultural celebration. The women around you aren't supporting cast members in a male-dominated drama. They're co-stars whose talents and knowledge make the entire production possible. You feel the earth's ancient rhythms pulsing beneath the wooden floorboards as the seasonal celebration unfolds around you, each ritual gesture connecting tonight's feast to the eternal cycles that govern all life in the harsh Nordic landscape. The timing of this gathering isn't accidental. It coincides precisely with the autumn equinox, when day and night balance on the knife's edge between summer's abundance and winter's stark beauty. The firelight seems to dance with extra intensity tonight, as if the flames themselves understand their crucial role in ceremonies that bridge the gap between human celebration and cosmic order. You can almost taste the approaching winter in the cool air that seeps through the walls, reminding everyone present that tonight's abundance must sustain both body and spirit through the long darkness ahead. The harvest decorations adorning the hall tell the story of another successful growing season, their presence serving as both thanksgiving and insurance policy against the uncertainties that lie ahead. Sheaves of grain bound with colorful ribbons create golden fountains that catch the firelight, while arrangements of late-season vegetables form cornucopias that would make modern Pinterest boards weep with envy. The apples gleaming like rubies in wooden bowls represent months of careful tending, their sweet fragrance mixing with smoke and mead to create an olfactory symphony that speaks of abundance earned through patient labor and favorable weather. The agricultural calendar that governs Viking life reveals itself through the feast's careful timing and traditional elements, each aspect chosen to honor the seasonal transitions that determine survival in northern climates. This isn't just a party. It's a community-wide acknowledgement of humanity's dependence on natural cycles that operate beyond human control. The grain used in tonight's bread was planted during spring ceremonies, tended through summer festivals, and harvested in autumn rituals that transform agricultural work into sacred activity. You realize you're participating in an annual cycle of celebrations that connects scattered farming communities across vast geographic distances. The preservation ceremonies that accompany seasonal feasts demonstrate sophisticated understanding of food science disguised as traditional ritual. The smoking, salting, and fermentation techniques being celebrated tonight represent knowledge accumulated over centuries of trial and error, refined into methods that ensure community survival during months when fresh food becomes impossible to obtain. Historians still debate whether Vikings understood the scientific principles behind these preservation methods, or simply observed that certain techniques produce consistently better results, but the effectiveness of their methods speaks for itself. The weather prediction rituals interwoven throughout the evening reflect the crucial importance of accurate forecasting in societies where survival depends on anticipating seasonal changes. The elder women observe cloud formations, wind patterns, and animal behavior with scientific precision. Their predictions based on decades of careful observation rather than mere superstition. Their knowledge encompasses meteorology, astronomy, and ecological patterns that modern weather services would recognize and respect, though they probably wouldn't appreciate the complete lack of satellite data and computer modeling. The seed blessing ceremonies that conclude the agricultural year demonstrate the forward thinking that separates successful communities from those that struggle to survive harsh Nordic conditions. The seeds being blessed tonight will spend the winter in carefully controlled storage, their viability protected through techniques that ensure spring planting can proceed according to traditional schedules. The blessings aren't just spiritual gestures, but practical quality control measures that identify the best specimens for next year's crops, while honoring the cosmic forces that govern agricultural success. The integration of solar and lunar observations into feast timing reveals sophisticated astronomical knowledge that rivals anything available to medieval European scholars. The positioning of tonight's celebration reflects calculations that account for seasonal variations, lunar phases, and stellar movements that influence everything from tidal patterns to optimal planting dates. You notice how certain rituals occur at specific times relative to moonrise and sunset, their timing calibrated to astronomical events that connect earthly celebrations to cosmic rhythms. The community work songs that echo through the hall preserve knowledge about agricultural techniques, seasonal timing, and cooperative labor arrangements that bind farming communities together across extended geographic areas. These aren't just entertainment. They're educational tools that transmit essential survival information through memorable melodies and rhythmic patterns. The songs encode everything from optimal planting depths to pest control methods, their verses serving as living textbooks that ensure crucial knowledge survives even when individual experts are lost to accident or illness. The seasonal feast traditions also serve as sophisticated social safety nets that ensure community survival during difficult periods. The abundance shared tonight creates obligations and relationships that provide insurance against crop failures, illness, or other disasters that threaten individual households. The feast isn't just celebration. It's investment in social capital that pays dividends when circumstances become challenging and mutual support becomes essential for survival. As you participate in rituals that connect tonight's gathering to the endless cycle of seasons, plantings, harvests, and preservation activities that sustain life in northern climates, you begin to understand that Viking civilization represents far more than martial prowess and exploration achievements. You're witnessing sophisticated ecological knowledge, astronomical observation, and agricultural science integrated into cultural celebrations that make survival not just possible, but enjoyable. The mead warming your throat carries the essence of summer flowers. The bread filling your stomach represents grain that grew under carefully calculated conditions. And the fellowship surrounding you reflects social systems refined over generations to ensure community prosperity through whatever challenges the changing seasons might bring. You sense the atmosphere shifting as the sacred elements begin to weave themselves into the celebration, transforming what started as community feast into something that touches the very essence of Viking spiritual life. The air itself seems to thicken with reverence as ceremonial objects emerge from their carefully guarded storage places, each item wrapped in traditions so ancient they predate memory. The firelight flickers differently now, its flames reaching upward like fingers seeking divine attention, while shadows dance across carved pillars and patterns that seem almost deliberate. You can feel the weight of countless generations pressing gently against your consciousness, their presence invited into this sacred space where the boundaries between mortal celebration and divine communion become as thin as morning mist. The ritual preparations unfold with precision that would make surgical teams envious. Each gesture performed according to protocols refined over centuries of spiritual practice. The designated priests move through their duties with graceful efficiency, their knowledge encompassing not just religious doctrine, but practical understanding of crowd psychology, ceremonial timing, and the delicate balance between entertainment and worship. You watch as sacred vessels are filled with specially prepared offerings, mead that's been blessed according to ancient formulas, bread baked with grains from fields consecrated for religious purposes, and water drawn from springs considered sacred by traditions that stretch back to the misty origins of Norse culture. The sacrifice ceremony begins with solemnity that transforms the jovial feast atmosphere into something approaching cathedral quiet, though hopefully with better ventilation and significantly fewer theological arguments. The animal selected for offering represents the community's finest livestock, a magnificent bull whose life will honor the gods while providing additional feast provisions. The sacrifice isn't performed with casual brutality, but with reverence that acknowledges the profound responsibility of taking life for spiritual purposes. Viking religious practices required clean, swift kills that minimized animal suffering while maximizing the offering's spiritual value. The integration of sacrifice with feast consumption reveals sophisticated understanding of resource management, disguised as religious ceremony. Nothing is wasted in the process. The blood is collected for ritual use and sausage making. The hide will be processed for leather goods. The bones will become tools and decorative objects. This practical approach to sacred activity demonstrates how Viking spirituality embraced rather than rejected the material world, finding divine presence within rather than separate from daily survival activities. Historians still debate whether this integration represents genuine religious conviction or pragmatic adaptation to harsh environmental conditions that made waste unthinkable. The blessing rituals that follow the sacrifice create moments of profound community connection, as individual guests participate in ceremonies that bind them together through shared spiritual experience. The priest's invocations call upon specific gods whose influence governs different aspects of life. Odin for wisdom and protection during dangerous ventures, Thor for strength in battle and defense against supernatural threats, Frey for agricultural prosperity and successful reproduction. Each blessing is accompanied by symbolic actions that reinforce the prayer's intent, while providing memorable elements that help preserve religious traditions through oral transmission. The rune casting ceremony provides glimpses into Viking divination practices that combined religious ritual with practical decision-making support. The carved symbols aren't just mystical decorations, but represent a sophisticated system for organizing complex information and exploring potential consequences of important choices. You watch as the priest interprets the fallen runes with expertise that encompasses not just symbolic meanings, but detailed knowledge of community dynamics, seasonal patterns, and historical precedents that influence current situations. The communal prayers that conclude the religious ceremonies create unified spiritual experiences that transcend individual beliefs and doubts. The ancient words carry power that seems to resonate through the hall's wooden structure, their rhythmic cadences producing effects that modern neuroscience might recognize as meditative states induced through repetitive vocalization and group synchronization. The prayers aren't just requests for divine intervention, but affirmations of community values, expressions of gratitude for current abundance, and acknowledgments of human dependence on forces beyond mortal control. The integration of women into religious ceremonies reflects their significant role in Viking spiritual life, as they serve as priestesses, oracles, and keepers of sacred knowledge that complements male-dominated martial traditions. Their participation in tonight's rituals demonstrates religious authority that extends beyond domestic duties to encompass community leadership in matters of spiritual significance. The female voices that join the ceremonial chants add harmonic complexity that enhances the prayer's emotional impact while preserving traditional vocal techniques that require years of training to master properly. The symbolic offerings that accompany the major sacrifice create opportunities for individual participation in community religious expression. Guests contribute personal items that represent their hopes, fears, and gratitude. Jewelry thrown into the sacred fire, weapons blessed for upcoming campaigns, household objects dedicated to ensuring domestic prosperity. These individual offerings become part of the collective spiritual experience while allowing personal expression within traditional frameworks. As the religious ceremonies blend seamlessly back into feast celebration, you realize you've witnessed something far more sophisticated than primitive superstition. You've participated in spiritual practices that integrate individual and community needs, that honor both practical survival requirements and transcendent human yearnings for meaning and connection. The sacred elements woven throughout tonight's feast don't separate religious experience from daily life, but demonstrate how Viking spirituality found the divine within rather than apart from human celebration, community bonds, and the endless cycles of abundance and scarcity that govern existence in the natural world. You feel the gentle weight of exhaustion beginning to settle over the hall like a comfortable blanket as conversations grow softer and the fire burns lower, its flames now more companion than centerpiece. The evening's abundant energy slowly transforms into something warmer, quieter, more intimate, the way all perfect celebrations eventually surrender to the peaceful satisfaction of shared experience well lived. Your eyelids grow heavy as you watch the last few hearty souls continuing their conversations in hushed tones, their words mixing with the gentle crackling of dying embers and the soft whisper of wine through the roof opening above. The cleanup begins with the same quiet efficiency that marked the evening service, as women move through the hall like benevolent spirits, gathering dishes and straightening decorations with movements so graceful they barely disturb the drowsy atmosphere. You notice how they work in harmony, their cooperation so natural it seems choreographed. Though of course the only choreography here is centuries of practice in managing the aftermath of celebrations that inevitably end with guests too satisfied to help much with the dishes. The serving vessels disappear with silent efficiency, leaving behind only the essential elements: the dying fire, the comfortable benches, and a lingering warmth of human connection. The gift displays remain arranged along the walls, their presence serving as tangible reminders of the evening's exchanges and the relationships that have been strengthened or newly formed. The silver arm rings gleam softly in the firelight, while the carefully crafted weapons rest in positions of honor that acknowledge their symbolic significance. These objects will remain as lasting testaments to tonight's gathering long after the last guest has departed, their presence continuing to reinforce the social bonds that have been woven through ceremony, story, and shared abundance. The gradual exodus of guests unfolds with the same hierarchical considerations that governed their arrival, as the most prominent families depart first with ceremonial farewells that acknowledge their status while expressing gratitude for the evening's hospitality. You watch as final conversations are concluded, last-minute business arrangements are finalized, and promises are made for future meetings that will continue the relationships begun or strengthened tonight. The departure process itself becomes a continuation of the evening's diplomatic activities, ensuring that political advantages gained during the feast are properly consolidated before everyone returns to their separate daily lives. The domestic arrangements for overnight guests reveal the practical hospitality that extends Viking generosity beyond the formal feast boundaries. Sleeping areas have been prepared with careful attention to status and comfort, providing warm furs and adequate privacy for those whose journeys make immediate departure impractical. The provision of overnight accommodation represents significant resource investment, but serves essential functions in maintaining the extended networks that keep scattered communities connected across vast geographic distances. Historians still debate whether the post-feast social arrangements carried formal obligations or operated primarily through informal expectations, but the evidence suggests sophisticated systems for managing the complex logistics of hosting major gatherings. The responsibilities extend beyond simple food and entertainment to encompass accommodation, transportation assistance, and the diplomatic management that ensures guests depart with positive impressions that will influence future relationships and community reputation. As the fire settles into its final glowing phase, casting gentle shadows that dance more slowly now, more peacefully, you find yourself reflecting on the evening's significance. This wasn't just a meal or even a celebration. It was a masterclass in community building, cultural preservation, and the ancient human art of transforming individual existence into collective meaning. The feast has served as theater, courtroom, marketplace, and temple all combined into one seamless experience that addressed every aspect of Viking social life. The lingering aromas tell their own story of abundance and satisfaction, as the sense of roasted meat, fermented mead, and wood smoke create an olfactory memory that will forever associate this evening with comfort, security, and belonging. These are the smells that will trigger warm recollections during long winter nights when community gatherings become impossible and individual households must sustain themselves on stored provisions and cherish memories of times like these. The hall itself seems to exhale contentment as the last conversations wind down and the remaining guests begin to settle into comfortable drowsiness. The wooden beams that witness tonight's celebrations hold within their grain the echo of laughter, the memory of oaths sworn, and the lingering energy of community bonds renewed and strengthened. The space that welcomed you as an individual guest now releases you as part of something larger, a member of the extended family that includes everyone who shared in tonight's abundance. As your own breathing begins to synchronize with the gentle rhythm of dying flames, as your muscles relax into the profound satisfaction that comes from participating in something meaningful and beautiful, you carry with you the understanding that you've experienced one of humanity's most essential activities. You've participated in the ancient magic that transforms individual survival into collective celebration, that weaves separate lives in a shared story, that creates the social bond strong enough to sustain communities through whatever challenges the future might bring. The feast ends not with fanfare, but with the quiet satisfaction of completion, as gentle as the closing of a well-loved book, as peaceful as the settling of snow on winter fields, as soft as the breathing of a satisfied community drifting toward dreams filled with the warm memory of abundance shared, stories told, and the enduring comfort of knowing that you belong to something larger, something warmer. something infinitely more precious than individual existence alone. Sleep comes easily now, carried on the wings of contentment, wrapped in the knowledge that some traditions create not just memories, but the very foundation of what makes life worth living, what transforms mere survival into celebration, what weaves individual threads in a tapestry strong enough to warm the human heart through all the seasons of existence that stretch ahead into tomorrow's gentle light.